Caballo Cave Incident. On February 5, 1994, 40-year-old Leland Smith joined a youth group on a trip to Caballo Cave, located in New Mexico. Leland wasn't just tagging along, he was a dedicated volunteer and a former police officer who had spent plenty of time working with kids. The trip was being led by experienced caver Steve Pearman, and the group was made up of students and a few other adult volunteers. Caballo Cave had always been considered safe, especially for beginners. The route in and out of the cave was standard, well-traveled, and had been crossed by hundreds of people without incident. As the group moved through the cave and wrapped up their trip, they began to make their way back toward the entrance. The exit route passed through a chimney, a vertical, narrow section with large boulders and broken-down rock. Near the top of the chimney was a sloped slab of breakdown, a type of loose, fractured rock that had become part of the regular path. Steve and a few students were already up top, waiting. Leland was helping one of the remaining students up the slab, acting as the steady hand that kids rely on in a place like that. As he gave the student a boost, the unthinkable happened. A massive piece of the slab suddenly broke loose. Leland didn't have time to react. The rock, weighing hundreds of pounds, came down on him, knocking him into the narrow chimney. Then, a second section of rock broke free and fell directly on top of him. Everything happened in a flash. Steve and another adult, hearing the crash, scrambled back down the chimney. What they found was devastating. Leland was pinned beneath the slabs, motionless. He had suffered catastrophic injuries, multiple fractures to his legs, spine, and neck. He was already gone. There was nothing they could do to move the boulders. The rocks had settled deep into the crevice, wedging themselves in so tightly that even shifting them slightly was impossible. The group, shaken and horrified, made their way out of the cave and called for help. The next day, a specialized team returned for the body recovery operation. The site was unstable, and they had to use shoring equipment to keep the remaining slabs from collapsing further. The rescuers found that the slab that had crushed Leland had been held in place by flowstone cementing, a thin mineral deposit that gave it the illusion of stability. No one had known it was fragile. It had looked solid. Then, a new problem emerged. Leland, as a former police officer, had been carrying a concealed semi-automatic pistol in a shoulder holster. It was fully loaded. Before anyone could move the rock or the body, a law enforcement officer had to enter the narrow chimney and safely remove the weapon. As the operation went on, rescuers slowly began removing debris. It took hours. At one point, another slab came loose and fell, hitting one of the team members. Luckily, the rescuer only suffered a minor bruise. After a full day of excavation, Leland's body was freed and carefully removed from the cave. The slab that had killed him was on a route used by novices for years. No one had ever imagined it could collapse like that. Banshee Hole Incident. In November 1992, 4 men descended into Banshee Hole, a remote vertical cave hidden in the forests of eastern Tennessee. The cave was known for its impressive 95-foot entrance shaft, which opened into a twisting series of narrow passages and chambers below. It wasn't the most dangerous cave in the region, but it wasn't suitable for beginners either. One of the men, later referred to in reports only as the victim, had never been in a vertical cave before. His experience came mostly from reading caving books and practicing knots on trees. He had just bought some basic gear and was eager to try real caving. Despite his inexperience, he was the most enthusiastic of the group. He volunteered to go first. With help from the others, he clipped into a fixed rope that was already anchored above the entrance and rappelled down into the shaft. One by one, the others followed, descending nearly 100 feet into the earth. The group explored the horizontal sections, moving through crawl spaces and tight turns until they reached a large, unfamiliar chamber. In one corner, they noticed a small, hidden tunnel, partially covered by flowstone. It looked unexplored, but daylight was fading, and they agreed it was time to head back. The only exit was the same vertical shaft they had used to enter. To avoid putting too much strain on the rope, they decided to climb out one at a time. Once again, the least experienced member volunteered to go first. His climbing setup was dangerous. He had fashioned a chest harness out of nylon webbing that wrapped tightly around his upper torso. He had no seat harness to distribute his body weight. He used 2 mechanical ascenders called Jumars and a pair of foot slings to inch himself upward. Worse, he had clipped the webbing directly to the rope with a carabiner, meaning the full force of his body weight would be concentrated on his chest and ribs. At first, he slowly made progress. The group watched the light from his headlamp disappear as he ascended. But just 10 feet from the top, he hit a problem. Near the surface was a feature called the lip, a sharp ledge where the cave flared outward. To get past it, climbers needed to pull themselves up and over, something that required upper body strength and proper gear. Without a seat harness, the improvised chest webbing pulled tighter every time he tried to move. He couldn't breathe or reposition himself. He was trapped. The group realized something was wrong when they heard strained, shallow breathing echoing down the shaft. Two cavers quickly climbed up to help. One tried pushing him from below, while the other adjusted the webbing. But nothing worked. It only made the harness squeeze tighter. One of the men exited the cave and called for help. Roughly 40 minutes later, rescue personnel arrived. A team rappelled down and rigged a pulley system to lift him the final few feet. As soon as they pulled his body over the lip, it went limp. CPR was started immediately, but it was too late. The man had gone into cardiac arrest, likely caused by positional asphyxia, his lungs compressed by the chest harness during prolonged suspension. At 1:52 a.m., the victim was officially declared dead. Ellison's cave tragedy. 10 students, 5 boys and 5 girls, from the University of Florida decided to go caving. The lead planner was 20-year-old Grant Lockenbach, who was to celebrate his birthday the following week. Grant, Michael, and some of the other students had gone caving before. This looked to be just another adventure. On February 12, 2011, they decided to explore Ellison's Cave, an over 1,000-foot deep cave nestled in Walker County on Pigeon Mountain in Georgia. This cave is considered the 12th deepest in America. But what's more striking is that it houses the deepest freefall pit in the U.S., the Fantastic Pit, nearly twice as tall as the Statue of Liberty. To get there, the students traveled over 400 miles the previous day. They reached Georgia in the afternoon and booked a hotel close to the wildlife management area where Pigeon Mountain is located. The following day, they got up enthusiastically and prepared for the climb. Dressed in casual clothing, they packed their caving essentials, headlamps, helmets, and ropes, into their vehicles. But they left their phones behind, a decision they would come to regret. As the group ascended the mountain, the cold intensified. Unfortunately, no one had thought to bring warmer clothing. After nearly an hour of hiking, the group reached one of the cave entrances, a narrow opening jagged around its edges. It was so small that only one person could pass through at a time. They couldn't see beyond it, but the darkness beckoned. One by one, they entered and were soon enveloped by darkness, lit only by their headlamps. Inside, the beauty of the cave amazed them, but they still had the biting cold to contend with. In the summer, the water in the cave is around 56 degrees Fahrenheit, so it was much colder in winter. The group settled on a brief exploration before heading back. Nobody was planning to bathe in the freezing water. But then something unexpected happened. One student's backpack fell into a vertical shaft known as the warm-up pit. Though not as deep as the Fantastic Pit, only 125 feet, it was still extremely dangerous. The temperatures there were even lower due to a roaring waterfall. Despite the risk, the backpack contained essential materials. It was supposed to be a quick drop and return. As the group leader, Grant volunteered to retrieve it. His friends warned him not to, sensing danger, but he insisted he'd be fine. They tapped him on the back and wished him good luck as he lowered himself down the pit. Grant slowly rappelled down. As the cold intensified, he began to shiver. Further down, the roar of the nearby waterfall grew louder. Still, he could hear his friends encouraging him. But halfway down, disaster struck. As he descended farther, Grant came face to face with the wailing waterfall. Now shivering violently, he tried to avoid the freezing water. But then, he heard a jolting sound from his harness and rope. He stopped moving. In panic, he tried to adjust, but the rope only tangled around him more. Eventually, the freezing water drenched him. He screamed for help, but his shouts were drowned by the waterfall and his chattering teeth. His friends heard him faintly and shouted back. Michael didn't hesitate. He strapped on the same rope and descended to help. Michael reached Grant, who was incoherent, shivering, and barely able to move. He yelled an update to the others above, but soon, Michael too became entangled. He was also soaked by the freezing waterfall. Now, both were trapped. Hearing this, the group above panicked. Some stayed behind to keep talking to the boys, while others raced down the mountain to call for help. In less than 30 minutes, they reached their car, retrieved their phones, and called 911. It was 2:19 p.m. Back in the cave, Grant and Michael's voices grew fainter. Their friends tried to keep them conscious with encouragement and prayer, but the cold was too much. It drained their energy, slowed their hearts, and weakened their lungs. After 30 minutes, their voices went silent. Their friends, devastated, could only watch the rope sway slightly in the cold air. Soon, rescue arrived. Part of the team tended to the other students while the rest descended the pit. At 3:30 p.m., they reached Grant and Michael, hanging lifeless from the rope. They checked their pulses. None. It was too late. If you enjoyed this video, subscribe for similar ones and feel free to drop suggestions for the next video in the comments.